رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Please straighten the serves, fill all the gaps, stand shoulder to shoulder. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.
الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إسرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله أستغفر الله
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair everyone for joining us today. Inshallah, we'll start the program after our sunnah prayers. If we can just have the brothers move to my left and they can pray their sunnahs there so we can set up the divider down the middle and the sisters will be on the right. So if we can just have the brothers shift to your right, to my left, greatly appreciate it. And then we'll get started after sunnah prayers and once we have everything set up. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Can we ask all brothers to move forward a little bit? Please fill in the gaps. Move forward. Jazakallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم. Jazakallah khair everyone for coming. We are here to obviously remember and pray for our brothers in Palestine, and also to educate ourselves about what is going on, what has been going on for over 70 years in that region. So alhamdulillah, we have individuals that have actually been to Palestine very recently, that are going to share their experiences. And we also have Brother Ahmed from CARE, who's going to enlighten us about some of the historical aspects as well as some of the civil rights during these times. Just one or two housekeeping announcements. Alhamdulillah, it's always wonderful to see children in the masjid. If we can just kindly ask the parents to stay with their children so that all of us can enjoy the program, inshallah. So at this time, I would like to request Hafiz Zayan to come up and begin with the recitation of the Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khair, Zayan. I apologize, I put him on the spot by asking him about 5 minutes ago to recite. So Jazakallah khair for doing that. At this time, I would like to introduce our panel of speakers, and that way I don't have to come back and forth, they can just continue the program. So first up, we'll hear from Dr. Ahmed, who needs no introduction in this community. He is often here doing programs and giving khutbahs and so on, but he is the Executive Director of CARE Philadelphia, and he will be speaking a little bit about the historical context as well as some civil rights and things to watch out for in these times. We also have with us two doctors from Fajr Institute. Fajr Institute is an organization that provides medical services and care to areas that need it. So in Palestine, they've been doing a lot of amazing work, rebuilding the medical infrastructure, going on site, providing different kinds of surgeries, specifically in pediatrics and orthopedics, where there's a lot of wound care and surgeries that are needed to rehabilitate the people and the communities. So we have Dr. Ali Anaim, who is a podiatrist in the Philadelphia area, and also Dr. Ibrahim Dura, who is a pediatrician from Bluebell. They were both actually in Palestine just before these recent attacks started. So we're honored to have them here. They'll be sharing their experiences and also talking about what their organization does and what the plan is to aid the people in Palestine. So if I can invite all of the panelists to join us in the front, and we can get started with Dr. Ahmed.
Clicker with me. So I'll be okay. Bismillah, assalamu alaikum everyone. Alhamdulillah, it's an honor to be here and grateful to Khair community for this invitation. I was asked by Sister Dana and Maz to provide a little bit of history and kind of Palestine 101 before setting the stage for Dr. Ibrahim and Dr. Ali, who will be giving us information from their time in Gaza specifically. Alhamdulillah, I was able to listen to Dr. Ali in Allentown earlier in the summer, and it's impressive work, and inshallah we'll all be supporting that work. So I'll be talking a little bit about the current situation, but also about the history, and we'll touch a little bit about some of the resources that we provide as a civil rights and advocacy organization today. So, quick historical overview, key issues, the ongoing situation, and civil rights. And of course, Masjid al-Aqsa will be on our minds and on our hearts throughout. So it's important, as Malcolm X mentions, right, for us to be educated and informed. And if we don't do that, as he warns, right, so we will believe in lies, and victims will believe that they are actually the threat. And we want to avoid that. Historical Palestine, right, so is in the historical maps over here, and the current map of Palestine, if you will, right, is composed of Gaza Strip and the West Bank. What we are hearing about is Gaza Strip about 2.5 million people, more than 50% children, right? For those of us who are blessed to be parents, we will have an easy time tonight, inshallah, to embrace them, to put them to sleep. And we know that our brothers and sisters don't have that luxury now. So you'll hear about Gaza Strip, Gaza City, Khan Yunis, and different cities in the Gaza Strip. And inshallah, we'll come back to this. Look at this map. This is often referred, right? So the lands of Palestine, or like what was of Palestinian people in historical procession from 1947 to then, again in 1947, we have the UN plan, Israel, more specifically created. And then over time, in 1967, and as such, lands being dwindling down. And currently, Palestine consists of an incongruous land, right? All these green areas are part of the West Bank, but there isn't freedom of movement between those areas. There are different areas that the UN has set up, and even according to that, there isn't a mobility of people, and we'll maybe talk a little bit more about that. Now, is what we are seeing a 1,000-year-old, very timeless conflict between two religions? Can I see a show of hands? Yes, no? Those who say yes, that we have been in this timeless conflict, with the Jewish faith, that's not the reality, right? What we are seeing is a very colonial question, very colonial problem in our hands. So sometimes you will see these, narratives that, Muslims and Jews have been fighting in Palestine, and this is the Holy Lands, and this fight has been ongoing. But it really starts in the 19th century. First with the British Empire coming into the historical lands of Palestine, and at the same time in Europe, nationalisms emerging, and with that a political ideology called Zionism emerging, and at the same time anti-Semitism emerging in Europe as a European, as a white people problem. We need to be clear about that to make sure that we can confidently argue against this political ideology of Zionism, right? Don't believe anyone who tries to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. This is one of the discourses that, unfortunately, ill-intentioned people forward, and we need to be clear-minded about that. So the first Zionist colony was established in 1882 in Palestine. The Zionists, like Theodor Herzl, they looked at different places over the world as a homeland for Jewish people who were being subjugated in Europe and who were suffering from anti-Semitism, right? And places in Africa were considered, and eventually, however, this political ideology and many of the followers of this ideology were non-religious Jewish people themselves. And currently, too, you will find a lot of secular Zionists. They don't have much of a relationship with the Jewish faith, but in terms of an ideology, right, they want this homeland for the Jewish people, and they think that anything and everything is justified to create that. So this colony first being established in 1882 near what is today Tel Aviv, and over time, this idea of a Jewish homeland in Palestine takes place. So there is a role for religion, but that is not the main story of what is going on, right? When you look at these pictures from the 80s and the 90s, the situation and the discourse of our people in these lands were very much the same. Once again, as we have said, it's a colonial story, right? British Empire comes in, and against the wishes of the native Palestinian Arabs, the British are granted a mandate over Palestine, and historically you will hear these terms like the historical Palestine or the mandate Palestine. So originally this mandate included what is today is the Jordan, and then over time it's split into different governments in 1920s as the Ottoman after First World War. And this time becomes a time of this political idea of Zionism taking root in Palestine. There are armed conflicts that start between these groups, these military groups, and like the local Palestinian community. And over time, right, we will arrive at the wall and the occupation, right? The wall and the occupation, the separation, that is what we get through history as history goes through. The British Mandate ends in 1948, and this is, the Nakba, right? So this is the establishment of the state of Israel in lands that were, previously Palestinian, and British troops withdraw. United Nations, at the time, the UN as a new organization, recommends a two-state, quote-unquote, solution, right? So a Jewish state and an Arab state, a Jewish state for Jews and an Arab state for Palestinians, and an international status for Al-Quds, for Jerusalem, right? There is war that breaks out following this, and the Jewish forces that were better armed and that were supported, move into the Palestinian lands, and many Palestinians now go to exile, become a landless people, become refugees, if you will. And we will see that, a majority of people in Gaza were actually people who are refugees. They don't have another homeland, right? So by the time Israel declares independence in 1948, right, so hundreds of Palestinians had fled their homes. And this is where academic discipline of history comes into play, dear brothers and sisters, right? What is called new historians in Israel, these are a group of Israeli historians. They look into archives to look whether the Israeli claim of Palestinians having willingly left their homes was correct or not. And this group of academics who are established in well-established universities, they show that, archives show that that was not the case, and there was intentional, essentially moving people out of their homes and intentional killings based on a strategic plan, right? We encourage all of you, and I think I will recommend everybody to check out the website called Decolonizing Palestine. Decolonizing Palestine, they have a very solid reading list for those of you who want to read more. But we have limited time, so I'll pass through. And I know that there are those of you Palestinians here, you will have insights, you will have family stories around what I am telling. Please feel free to jump in maybe in the Q&A session as well. So Israeli military eventually controls around 78% of Mandate Palestine, right? So that historical sort of era that the British had. So the remaining 22% is the West Bank and the Gaza, right? And again, it was then controlled by the Jordanian and the Egyptian administrations respectively. And this is what gives us really, as you can see over here, right? So that process. This map, this belonging, this larger land, in 1967, after 1967, comes down to this map, because in 1967 there's another war, and Israel this time occupies an increased amount of lands. And by this time in Israel, there is the ideology of Zionism and the ideology of settlements, and the religious discourse also takes shape slowly over the secular idea of establishing a nation as well. There's a lot to be told here in terms of American foreign policy, how the United States was in the world stage in different ways throughout time, but that's maybe the subject of another time. Again, later what happens is, after 1967, the discussion becomes, give us land for peace. This idea of a two-state solution really starts to take place, and the UN resolutions, international law, specifically mentions that Israel is an occupying force in Palestinian lands. And there are Palestinians who live in occupied territories, right, quote unquote, and that Israel is responsible for these. Now, there's a lot of debate, of course, whether Israel should be recognized, this, that, and then Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, eventually makes a political decision to recognize Israel, hoping that there would be peace at the end of that and that there would be a process. Palestinian community obviously internally agrees, disagrees, but what is key for us to keep in mind is that years of concessions, years of giving the concessions to the Israeli government does not produce any peace and any stability for the Palestinian community, right? The international community too, there are many peace talks and as such, and over time that becomes the case. So occupation, as we have said then, right, becomes a term that is important. The right to return becomes internationally important terms for the Palestinian community and for the refugees, right? There are these obligations and limitations on the occupying force. Occupation isn't legitimized, but then as occupation continues, there are responsibilities, and the state of Israel continuously achieves these responsibilities. Now, that gives us, a process, and we could talk again for a long time on many of these issues, but I'm going to cover 5 things that you should know and keep in mind about what's going on. And I'm going to be clear, much of this information is from the Institute for Middle East Understanding, IMEU, which is a very reputed organization. 1, there is a right-wing government in the state of Israel, right? So this is a government that is composed of racist individuals, and they had already intensified the occupation, and they had already intensified violent repression of Palestinians. And Dr. Ali, I think you will have stories around that. The very first image that you saw was a Palestinian child walking towards a checkpoint, right? So imagine every day going to school on Egypt Road. You are stopped just randomly. You're asked to go through, just put everything that you own, even strip down, and some people with armed, guns and heavy machinery search you, right? That is the reality of the Palestinians. So before this very recent, search, right? Just this year, earlier in May, 250 Palestinians were killed in Gaza by Israel, and also in the West Bank, right? And this has been ongoing. If you ask people in Gaza, they will say every year they run through this exercise of killing us, right? And the other issue is that what the state does and what its military does is compounded by how they facilitate violence in the hands of armed settlers, right? These settlements often, occupied by people, unfortunately, sometimes, traveling from the United States to these lands with this religious fanaticism is also really part of the problem, right? So they shoot civilians, they can burn their homes, they go and seize their homes, and all of this has been going on throughout this year. You may have seen families, their historical homes that have been with them 3-4 generations in Jerusalem, right, being seized by these, settlers. And the Israeli political and judicial system facilitating that for them against all international law. Now, the second thing to keep in mind, the reality of military occupation for Gaza is not new. It's been going on for 50 years, right? Under international law, Gaza remains an occupied territory under Israeli military occupation. And because of this, right, Gaza has been subject to this blockade. All entry exits are controlled, and even medical missions go through so many loops to be able to do that. And the reality of them being dependent on this Israeli military occupation is very key. Third, how am I doing with time? Are we okay? All right. Israel has imposed a suffocating illegal siege and naval blockade on Gaza for more than 15 years. Right? I mean, it comes easy to us. We have a lot of mobility, alhamdulillah, right? If you want to go to college in another state, next year, mashallah, you have a lot of those possibilities. And for Gazans, over 2 million people, more than 50% children, that has not been the case. and everything from water to gas to electricity is dependent on this occupying force, and it wins. It wins. So there is an ongoing systemic repression of people. And again, as we have said, most Palestinians in Gaza themselves are refugees that were expelled from historical southern Palestine in 1948, right? And this means that they have a legal right to return simply because they are refugees. But in Israeli military occupation, this system, they don't have that right because they are not Jewish. So eventually, right, all in all, we can say that the source of the problem is there is a military occupation and there is a colonial system that has been set up since 1948. Are there Israelis that are not happy with that? Yes. Are there peace groups within Israel? Yes. Right? But the reality of the Palestinians has not really changed, and we need to be clear about this, especially now there is so much misinformation about Palestine and the reality of Palestinians. We should not waste our time by just defeating arguments, but to have that clarity historically ourselves and to educate ourselves, inshallah. So I hope some of this was helpful. So just briefly, and I know that both of you will contextualize this and tell us lived history. So I want to mention a few resources that are available for the community through us. If you go to pa.care.com, our website, on the main page, you will see a link that will take you to template letters that is intended for school districts, intended for employers, intended for universities that have unfortunately blatantly issued one-sided statements on what is going on and have denied the humanity of the Palestinian community. Right? Use these letters to send notes to them. Personalize it as much as possible. If you have a story, tell that story. All of these really matter at this time. We have proactively also reached out to school districts, encouraging them to not do one-sided statements and to care about their school community. And alhamdulillah, in several cases, we have succeeded in that. It's unfortunate that we also know that there are groups that are reaching out to these schools, these establishments, to issue one-sided statements, and we need to be proactive on that. Again, on the web page, you will see the letter that over 60, 70 masajid have sent to Governor Shapiro, criticizing him for failing to recognize the humanity of Palestinian Pennsylvanians since day one of the most recent conflict. In any of the statements, the governor did not mention the word Palestinian once, and only in response to our letter, mixed with incorrect information, they said something about civilians. On Friday evening in Harrisburg, there was a pro-Palestine rally, and someone was exchanging words with our community members who were protesting from his car, and then eventually pulled a gun to the protesters. The man has been apprehended and is charged with ethnic intimidation, terroristic threat, and simple assault. But that is not enough, and we have not seen, as of this moment, until I started speaking, official condemning this situation, at the very least saying, hey, this is wrong in our state, right? We need to speak up, and we need to keep these officials intact and call them to be mindful. All right. It's stuck here. Let's go on. All right. So there is also on Islamophobia.org a CARE sort of run website, some best practices for advocacy and on how to speak about the issue. And similarly, you are going to see, I don't know why let's do this. It's not responding. I think it's going to come. Right? For your legal concerns, if you need legal advice, If you need legal representation, please reach out pa.care.com/report. Our legal team, Sister Iman and Timothy Welbeck, our full-time civil rights attorney, inshallah, will return your call. We have seen already community members, I've spoken to an attorney actually. He himself posted things and then FBI paid him a visit. Being an attorney himself, he didn't need help, but we still, even if that happens to be the case, ask you to report these so that we can have the data on the experiences that our community is having. And finally, in terms of higher education settings, there is also a lot of issues around free speech and doxing, right? So you might have seen that Harvard students who spoke out have been profiled on the web, and their information has been released. And one of the individuals that did this is based in Philadelphia and used a corporate email, and we have sent that company an email asking them to clarify their own stance and whether corporately they support the actions of this individual who is trying to quote-unquote expose our students. So there are also some resources on this. Finally, my email, my phone number is over here, our website. So inshallah, we want to be a resource to our community during this time through media engagement and through advocacy and through legal help, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. I'm now going to bring up the Fajr Scientific presentation, and we will, inshallah, invite Dr. Ali and Dr. Ibrahim to talk.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I want to start by saying thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present and then show you the history of Palestine and then what our people out there are going through every single day. I had the pleasure and the blessing to go this year to Palestine and specifically Gaza's trip out there. I went to Gaza with, as you can see, there was almost 27 people out there, you could tell. This young man, he is from inside Palestine, from Ramallah out there. He's a surgeon who came in from Ramallah to train under this orthopedic surgery department or group. This Fajr Scientific started about 2 years ago, where they did 2 missions so far. First mission was done in West Bank in January, and then they did about 49 to 50 surgeries. And then this Fajr organization was established by Dr. Khalid Saleh and then Dr. Misab as an orthopedic and as a surgical avenue to help Palestinians and then help any people are in need, to be in Egypt, to be in Pakistan, to be in any nation that they will request us, inshallah. We're building such a huge momentum right now that we were going to be probably 100 orthopedic surgeons and probably about 50 anesthesiologists to travel to any country in need. And then now we're doing it once a year or twice a year. We are willing, inshallah, to do it once a month or once every 2 months to travel with our instruments and everything out there to go ahead and then commit and then do surgical procedures. Fajr Scientific, as you could see, it is non-political and dedicated only to the treatment and the help of people on the ground. We have no domination and then we have no political affiliation. We offer exceptional skills for the surgeons. Some of these surgeons are trained at Harvard University. Some of them speak Arabic. A lot of them are from Pakistan, born and raised in the United States of America. A lot of American surgeons traveled with us this year to accomplish this mission. This is Dr. Khalid Saleh, who is an orthopedic surgeon who works for the VA. He works for the VA for 30 years. And then Dr. Misab, he's a physicist. He's from Gaza, he's from Beit Hanun, which is the entrance of, it's right after the entrance of Eris. These are some of the physicians that we have on board. Hussein al-Husi, he is one of the greatest guys in Houston up there. He does a lot of sports medicine. So he traveled with us up there to train the surgeons in Gaza how to do ACL repair. And then if I tell you that if any human being or any kid injured his ACL and then medial meniscal tear as a young person in Gaza, the wait was a year or a year and a half. And we know that tendons after a year and a half, it's definitely cannot be repaired primarily. So he went in now, and then he trained a lot of the surgeons in Gaza how to do ACL and meniscal tear. Some other orthopedics that they are Dr. Muhammad Musa is a Harvard graduate, mashallah. He does a special joint replacement. So a failure of joint replacement. And if you know the history of a lot of the physicians overseas, they do what we call hit and run. Okay, if you end up with an infection, I mean, it's qada wa qadar. I mean, you're just gonna have to deal with the consequences. They may have to remove you, either you have to end up with an amputation, or versus you're gonna have to end up with removal of this implant and fusing your knee so you'll never bend it. So it is a very difficult situation. So Al-Husi, mashallah, he does a lot of revisions, especially with hip replacement. If it gets out of the socket, you'll have to do some certain osteotomies or certain movement of the bone for you to fit it back in a certain position. So some of these guys out there are icons. This young man, Pedro Serra, out there, he is from Portugal. I trained him in this country. And then first when I called him up and I said, can you come with me to Gaza? And then he said, sure. I said, we may not have a lot of funding for the whole thing. I'm going to buy my own ticket. He goes, brother, I'll buy my own ticket and I'll bring my own tent and I will sleep on the beach to help the people. I mean, mashallah out there. The brother, he is like one of the best people out there I've met in my whole entire life. This guy, Alex Gilroy, so when I trained some residents at Temple University Hospital and then Nazareth. So we're sitting down up there in a small little meeting, and then I asked everybody, I said, would anybody like to come with me to Gaza? And then no one, they want complete silence. And one of the residents said, Dr. Naim, there's a war there now? I mean, you're gonna go to a war zone? So this young man, he must have wanted to ask me a question. I said, okay, you're going. And then, so he ended up going with us up there. And he had such a great time in Gaza. This is another group of physicians that there with us. Dr. Kadura, who was here, he's an anesthesiologist in Houston. He came with us. Because a lot of the problems with surgeries overseas is the method, the sterilization, and anesthesia holds a big problem because a lot of people end up with complication from anesthesia, either aspiration or problem post-op. There's some of the other surgeons that we have. So this is some of the institution up there that some of these graduates came from. This is a fundraiser that we've done in a couple of other places where we rely on nothing. Our funding is literally comes from fundraisers. So our work, our future work is now to do a little bit more. So this is our last mission. We went to Gaza. We did 185 cases, 45 joint replacement, 65 surgeries out there of foot and ankle, which is a lot of kids. They have a lot of deformities, literally being corrected at an early stage. If there is an institution that will correct it. If there's no institution or there's no follow-up, and if you're poor, you can't even afford a pair of orthotics, which is like a pair of orthotics. We take it for granted in this country. It's about $30, $45. These people can't even afford a pair of orthotics for the young kids or good tennis shoes. 85% of the patients, God be my witness, that I saw in Gaza, they came in slippers. Slippers. And if you know, because they can't even afford having a beautiful New Balance or a beautiful Brooks like the kids what we have out here in this country. So this is what we had. We reached out to a lot of these companies. Stryker gave us about $100,000 worth of instruments. Flower Organization gave us $500,000 worth of screws. They called me up, they contacted me, they heard about the mission, and they said, would you take about screws about to expire? Because in this country, they will not reprocess it again. It's packaged, so they will rather dump it and then call it as waste. So we took it with us. We reopened back the screws. We re-sterilized all the plates and screws. And this is what we had. We had shipped. Actually, we contacted the Israeli government, and the Israeli government said, you go into Gaza, we'll facilitate for you to have all the shipment inside Gaza. So they did not give us any hard time out there bringing all these instruments inside Gaza because no one goes. There's multiple people go inside Gaza. PCRF sends a lot of their missions into Gaza, open heart surgery, and people for chemotherapy. They opened up a center for chemotherapy. Prior to them opening a center for chemotherapy, people used to die waiting for a visa to go into Israel proper to be treated for chemotherapy. And then they will go probably to be treated when it's too late, and they send them back in a body bag, say, I'm sorry, but we cannot do anything for this kid. So this is the shipment that we had, worked on it for a long period of time. And then when we got to Gaza, the first day we got to Gaza, we got there, we got to Eris. We landed in Tel Aviv at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then they had a commando with us who already knows all our name. We have been cleared with all the Israeli government, and then they said, okay, well, you're ready to go. So we went to Eris. Took us 4 hours to enter inside Eris, because they had to ask us a million questions, why and why not, and then what are you doing inside there, and all so forth. After we hit over to the warehouse where we sort out all these instruments, and then instruments go to Shifa Hospital, instruments goes to European Hospital, and another hospital. So they literally give us, each one of the teams that we have was given 4 to 5 rooms a day with anesthesia, with all the equipment. So we took with us from A to Z, because the instruments they have is literally primitive. I mean, if you see some of the saws that they have, either they fix or they remove a leg. That's about the only thing they know how to do in that area. So this is us, literally Dr. Hossi and then myself, literally operating and then teaching the locals. So our mission was not only just to fix people. Our mission is, instead of you bringing the knowledge or the screws on and fixing people on the ground, teach these competent doctors on the ground how to deal and wheel, and then how to do their surgery. So our mission was 150 in 5 years, meaning doing 150 surgeries every single year, and then within 5 years to take or to transfer all the knowledge that we know in the United States of America, how we do procedures, into the locals and the physicians in Gaza and in the West Bank. Teach them exactly the American method or the newest method, how to operate, and then help their own people. So this is Dr. Saleh after he was doing joint replacement. Literally, we took 100 joint replacement with us. These are the kind of kids we're dealing with. This is actually this is one of the orthopedic guys who was operating with me. He's a 5th-year orthopedic surgeon. And this is us out there. They were doing scopes in the Shifa Hospital, and this is Nasser Hospital, and then the same thing for the Shifa Hospital. That's another procedure out there, how the surgeon have been taught, and then Dr. Hossi out there trying to teach them the way we do things. This is the instruments out there for ACL repair. Same thing with Dr. Khaled after doing a joint replacement. It's another. So Fajr Scientific, as I mentioned, in the West Bank, and then also in Gaza. I already had spoken about this with this whole thing. Number of hospitals, 5 in Palestine. So for the next year that they were planning, we already gathered so much momentum. We have now almost 75 to 85 orthopedic surgeons and almost 30 anesthesiologists. And then Dr. Durra up there, along with us up there, is going to bring a couple of the dentists along with him to go ahead and then do multi-mission. Not only ortho, it's going to be ortho, and we're trying to do general surgery. We're trying to do multi-specialties, and then in advance to teach the public or to teach the surgeons out there how to care for their own. The partners of the missions out there, literally, we partners with multiple people out there, anesthesia, with physical therapy. They went with us, one radiologist went with us. A couple of this complicated procedure, which was never done in Gaza, was done in this last mission. So the donation up there we had, the mission cost about $5 million overall. For this coming up trip, now we're thinking about $6 to $7 million up there we have to do. So we are trying to do fundraising. We're trying to get some of these companies to donate, like Arthrex, Stryker, Zimmers, and all the stuff out there to donate some of these procedures. Like PCRF have some missions. Also, Flower Orthopedic gave us a huge amount of supplies, Stryker, Arthrex. So and then that's what exactly I spoke about is 150 in 5 years, meaning doing a lot of surgeries in each category out there, 50 in each category. We're going to do joint replacement 50, foot and ankle 50, arthroscopy 50, and then teach the locals how to perform and do their duties. So for next year, we're projecting 600 to 700. We're going to be 2 teams. One team is going to stay in the West Bank and then operate three hospitals in Jerusalem, Nablus, and then in Hebron, which is Mustashfa Alia. And then the other team will go into Gaza if Allah will save Gaza, inshallah. So now our standard is an emergency relief. Right now, I mean, the hospitals are losing power. Hospitals are losing instruments. Hospital ran out of all their reserve at this point. So here we are today, really not funding for the next mission. We still have time for the next mission. What we are funding for today is we're funding for the emergency relief, to send some instruments, to help these kids out there who are dying, to help these kids who are really injured and then they need the medical supplies to be saved. And as you can see, some of these pictures are gruesome, but this is what Gaza today. So some of these kids, yep, they don't even have casting material. So today we come over here just to show you. I know these pictures are gruesome. I know, but this is the reality on the ground right now. And then we need your help to literally just send some medical supplies to Gaza. Just gather and then do medical supplies to Gaza. We're not here to support anything else but help these kids, help these facilities up there replenish. That's all. Jazakum Allah khair. Thank you so much for listening.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين. Thank you, Brother Bilal, for hosting us today. We come to you today with very heavy hearts. I remember when we came here in March, when we had the grand opening of the mosque, and our hearts were filled with joy and pride that this was a huge accomplishment. I remember Brother Bilal sharing the plans and his vision about building an Islamic community center. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, this was a huge accomplishment. But today, while I was driving with my wife, I was driving with my emotions being very high, and I was wondering what I was going to talk about. But first of all, just for the record, I have to make a correction. I am a pediatric dentist, I'm not a pediatrician. And Dr. Ali Jazallah Khair and our brother, Dr. Amr Qadoura, were involved in the last mission, but I was not there. So inshallah, the plan is to be there. I was involved with other organizations like PCRF. Dr. Ali and his wife, Jazahullah Khairan, hosted a number of Palestinian kids in the Philadelphia area, and they also facilitated bringing other kids from Palestine. So I'm a pediatric dentist, and I was involved in fixing their teeth and educating them, and I specialize also in treating special needs patients. So I was involved with multiple missions in Jordan and also the Palestinian kids that were brought here to the US. But Alhamdulillah, we hope that we will continue doing. You know, the last week was very heavy, as I said, on all of us. Sometimes we feel like hopeless, but as Muslims, we have great faith, and we know, inshallah, the Palestinians will prevail because we are on the right side of history. We encourage everybody to do dua and exert in the dua. That's the number one thing we can do. Second, you can educate yourself and educate your neighbors and your co-workers about what's going on in the Islamic world. And I always remember Prophet Muhammad's hadith, مثل المؤمنين في توادهم وتراحمهم كمثل الجسد الواحد إذا اشتكى منه العضو تداعى له سائر الأعضاء بالسهر والحمى. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gives an example of al-ummah is like a body. If there's one part that's ailing or hurting, the rest of the body or the rest of the organs will rally to cure and heal this body. So we care about Palestine specifically because Palestine is not that is different than any other country, but Palestine is in the heart of every Muslim. Palestine is Masr al-Rasul. Palestine is Bayt al-Maqdis. This is an amana, this is a duty for every Muslim to support Palestine and Gaza. We don't differentiate between any Muslim in any part of the world, in Kashmir, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in any part of the world. But Palestine right now is in a huge need of support. As I said earlier, exert in your dua. Exert in your dua. Number one. Number two, open your wallets and try to donate to a good cause so we can help our people there. And thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum. I want to mention again that we have a QR code right here. So literally, you could donate it, goes to Fajr, and then we actually have already one to two right now of one of these big containers up there are ready to go. Once they give us the okay to bring it in from Egypt side up there, inshallah, it will go. So we're trying our best up there, inshallah. This couple of days up there on the brothers and sisters down there up there will be peaceful days. Sorry.
Jazakallah khair to all of our guests. We have a few minutes to Isha prayer. So if anyone from the audience has questions for the guests, we can do that. There are some refreshments in the back in the serving areas, both on the men and women's side. So please help yourself. If you are exiting, I request just please do it quietly so that our guests can hear the questions. Isha Iqama is at 8:15, so make sure that we're prepared for Isha. Again, if you're exiting, please exit quietly. If you have questions, please feel free to raise your hands. And the guests can answer them, inshallah. Also, definitely please support the work that you just heard that Fajr Scientific is doing is amazing. They're preparing, as Dr. Naim said, to prepare a shipment to send over as soon as they're able to. So they're collecting medical supplies and equipment, and also getting ready to rebuild the infrastructure that's going to be very much needed as a result of everything that's been happening. So the QR codes are here. I'm going to try and get it on the TV as well, but the website is fajrscientificus.org. We also have donation boxes and the square tap machines in the front. If you want to process your payment donation through credit card, I can help you with that. If you write a check, you can write it to Fajr Scientific. So if you want to write a check, you can give it to Dr. Naim directly, written out to Fajr Scientific. Inshallah, we can take questions.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Good to see you. So my question is very simple. I think Gaza is kind of open prison. That's the definition. I mean, I know as per a lot of struggle. So from your own perspective or own like the things, what would be the permanent solution that we can moving forward to in this struggle that Muslims can get rid of?
Well, maybe Osama is probably better suited to answer this question. The answer is to finish the occupation. You have to address the core problem, which is the occupation. So you have to end the occupation so the Palestinians can live freely. Without addressing the core problem, there is no solution. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان. There has to be justice first before you talk about peace and before you talk about two states and borders and everything. Once you accomplish that, then you can move to the next step. So, in short, yeah.
To get to the core of the problem first.
I had a question. Dr. Ali, if you already touched on this, I apologize, during the presentation. Can you just touch a little bit about your most recent experience, how many procedures you were able to do with when your whole team visited, and What did you see when you went?
I was able to do myself 65 procedures, and literally some of these procedures are lingering procedure out there. Some people broke their ankle and they end up with severe osteoarthritic changes that they could not walk, they could not work, they could not do anything. And I have a couple of videos out there. I mean, I should have probably shared with you a couple of videos that I have on my phone. Well, literally, I ask people every single morning, how do you feel and how long have you had this problem? And then they will say, I've had it for a couple of years, I couldn't walk, and then we end up fusing their ankles. And I mean, literally, they do not have lyophilized bone. They didn't even have bone grafts. The bone grafts that we like we have here, we take it for granted. We use bone from a human being that has been sterilized. They didn't even have it. So we had to go into the iliac crest or around the hip area and then take bone graft from every single person that we operated on that needed a bone. I mean, that's how bad is the situation and how dire the need in Gaza Strip. They did 45 total joint replacement and I believe 57 procedures of ACL plus scopes. So overall, I think it was in the corner of 180 to 185 total of the procedure that we've done this last trip. That's it, only in 8 days. 8 days. We used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go home at 10 o'clock at night.
Can I say a follow-up, Dr. Ali, after this cycle, this genocide attempts, there will be, inshallah, some of our brothers and sisters survive. What do you expect in terms of the orthopedic needs?
We're expecting after this, after what's going on right now, the bombing, and after all what's going on, we're expecting probably 300, 400 fold the problems that they had. We're talking about broken bones left and right, talking about deformities since they were kids. And we know that kids, they have something called growth plate. Once you disturb that growth plate, they will always have a problem for the rest of their life at the orthopedically. So may Allah be with them.
Any other questions from the audience? I don't know if this is going to extend our sister, but let me try.
Assalamu alaikum. So something I've been asked in the past week was, as Muslims, like how should we react when non-Muslims ask us about like Hamas and stuff and like the difference between standing up for Palestine and then people who do things that might hurt people?
Let me repeat the question. The question was, the sister is asking, like, if a non-Muslim, someone else asks about, like, Hamas and, like, violence, how do we process, how do we respond? So the way that I respond to that is, one, Hamas was established in 1987, right? As we have seen in the historical procession, this issue is a historical question. It is the injustices and the occupation is a historical issue, not just like, started yesterday, not because of, just Hamas and all. We don't need to defend any organization, what they do and all of that. My response becomes, violence against civilians is not acceptable, whoever does it, and let's talk about occupation as the root cause of this. If you are so concerned about the organizations doing XYZ, the root cause needs to be addressed and the root cause needs to be removed, right? There is an obsession among some circles to just speak about, that, as if there's nothing else to talk about, as if politicians like Mahmoud Abbas, the current Palestinian Authority leader, has given all the concessions, is the most sort of like, quote-unquote complacent or like, mellow person that they can engage with, and yet peace has not been established, and yet there was a racist government that is doing all the injustices. I think reminding people of these and reminding people of the human stories and seeing past these, headlines is really an important point. But at the same time, like, you can criticize, organizations, individuals. I think like we also can't shy away from that. That's fine. But then again, are you genuinely interested in talking about humanity, peace, civilians, saving lives, right? So that's important, in my opinion. But I'll also.
No, I fully agree with you. I mean, I fully agree with you. The root of the problem has nothing to do with one organization or another or one faction or another. The root of the problem lies in the problem itself. Okay, so the pulp of the whole problem is the problem itself. It needs to be resolved. It needs to be readdressed. There's no need for 1,000 checkpoints out there, people to survive. There's no need for somebody who is next door to another person out there to travel 15 miles just to go around an area out there to bypass million thing out there to go see his mom or to go see her mom or whatsoever. So this whole root of problem has to be addressed. Otherwise, the problem will always be there.
Dr. Ibrahim, did you want to add anything on this? But thank you for the question. Any other questions, reflections? I see Alex. Alex, this is the extended cut. Alex Salil is a local politician, a Palestinian leader herself. So.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Alexandria Khalil. 2 years ago, my 18-year-old cousin Mus'ab Nefel was murdered by the Israeli military. He was on his land. They said they shot him because he was throwing rocks. He was on his land. A few years earlier, my 14-year-old cousin Ma'moon Nefel was also murdered by the IDF. He was standing underneath an olive tree. Both these two murders were reported by the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, if you'd like to know about it. And I have a copy of the one about Mus'ab. The constant and everyday life of Palestinians, whether it be in the Gaza Strip or in the West Bank or in East Jerusalem, is a nightmare. It didn't start, as I told someone who I thought was a friend of mine, on October 7th. My cousin was killed 2 years ago. The other one was killed a few years earlier. Every day, young men and young women are being killed and murdered. Their homes are being attacked. There are over 200 children in Israeli prisons right now. Over 200 children. And no one talks about those children. There's a 13-year-old boy currently in Israeli military prison who is so traumatized that he suffers from schizophrenia. I abhor violence, and I am not a supporter of Hamas. Hamas actually was started with the help of the Israeli government. And it was funded and used to stabilize, supposedly, the Gaza Strip. But in the end, it still didn't stop the killing of Palestinians. So thank you so much for your support. It is appreciated by my family and friends.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for coming here. The first question is regarding the current situation in Gaza. Of course, we listened to Al Jazeera that the situations in the hospitals are so bad. But from your knowledge, how long can they stand until, like, we say, okay, it's a hopeless case. They don't have enough gas. They don't have enough help. They don't have enough equipment to help the people of Gaza. But before, if you don't mind, before we answer this about Hamas, Hamas is, if they don't want Hamas, the only thing that can end Hamas is actually ending the occupation. So if they hate Hamas that much, the solution is ending the occupation. So Hamas is part of Palestinians. They are Palestinians. They're part of the people. So we can't say that, oh, the violence they do. All the thing that we can see is because of the resistance. It's a resistance movement. So if they hate Hamas this much, in the occupation, the resolution will come. Yeah. And regarding my question.
Even though I was in Gaza out there, I mean, I was doing surgery, so I really cannot really comment on how long can they stand and what's going on. I mean, knowing what I know, there's a lot of generators are running out of gas. I mean, running out of electricity. I mean, I don't know. I really cannot tell you. I mean, I hear it as much as you do from the news of Al Jazeera. That's about the only thing that I know. I don't really know much about the whole thing. The fact that I was there for 9 days does not really make me the authority or anything up there that I have to comment on this kind of subject. But
Okay. Do I see any other questions, reflections? Anyone in here from Palestine who wants to say? I see the brother who wants to say something.
Yeah, hi everyone. Just wanted to ask, I think everybody's probably familiar about how unfair and unjust what's going on is, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts about, the bias of the media here and what can be done to share our story appropriately and address the extreme bias that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, because I think we all know about it, but it's shocking as how one-sided the portrayal of this whole situation has been over the past days.
Yeah, no, thank you. The brother's question was around the bias in the media and how do we address that. I want to address one thing for all of us, which is to look at some numbers and to look at, the position that, when you watch the media, obviously there is bias. You'll be disturbed. But don't think everybody buys into that. Let's not get into hopelessness either, right? I'm going to just run through a few statistics that Rethink Media has put together. Sympathy towards Palestinians is among the US adults is at its height currently. It's the new high of 31%. It can be higher, but it is still high. It is the highest. There is some party statistics there. Again, all of us are non-political organizations, but to say democratic sympathies lie more with Palestinians than Israelis, with 49% versus 38%. And among independents, with 32%, again, support is at its height. Millennials, right, so the ages of 23 to 43, sympathize more with Palestinians than the Israeli government, right, 42% to 40%. Now, within the Republican landscape, you see 78% support for Israel, which hasn't really changed. 62% of American adults are either unfamiliar or answer, I don't know much about the concept of Zionism. Okay, that's something else that we need to note. And about 84% of Americans say they haven't heard much or nothing about the BDS movement, the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions movement. So some of our work and messaging is being guided by these statistics and other studies, right? There is bias in the media, but there is also our voices that are coming forward as well, right? So we cannot be hopeless. We just need to be proactive in writing to local newspapers, putting forward our stories, and making sure that, most importantly, what we call relational organizing. You have relationships at school, with your neighbors, with your colleagues. Don't shy away from talking with them. That is the most impactful, the most effective way of changing opinion one by one. Except that they might have listened to something, biased on CNN or whatever, platform. But then, tell them personal stories from your community, from your own experience, right? Tell them about the story of Alex, who lost 2 relatives that you have heard. Tell them about the missions of, Dr. Ali and his colleagues, about Dr. Ibrahim's, notes. We need to keep telling about the young brother who was killed in Chicago, right? These stories are important, and inshallah, there is a role for all of us, from young to old, to work on that, and not fall into despair and not fall into merely, we cannot do anything. I think that spirit and that hope, that spirit of saying Bismillah and seeing us being here as our test and our challenge, as our brothers and sisters are going through their own test and challenge, is our responsibility as Muslims, as conscientious human beings, right? Inshallah.
thank you so much for coming. Jazakallah khair. And then inshallah that we could always work together in one group, inshallah. So.
Yes, Jazakallah khair to all of our guests and everyone for attending. Again, the QR code is on the TV. I have the credit card machine. Donation boxes are in the back. So please support. Isha prayer will be in just 20 minutes. So enjoy some refreshments and tea in the back. And we can do the adhan, inshallah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا